Namaskar. Today we are going to have a discussion with Professor Naidu on the subject Policy and Ethical Lessons, a long term model to conserve the Great Nicobar Island. Professor Subramanyam Naidu is a distinguished anthropologist and a futurist whose research over 4 decades has illuminated the complex relationship between tribal societies, environment, and modern development. His extensive fieldwork in all the 75 primitive tribes across India and the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, particularly his deep engagement with the Shompen tribe of Great Nicobar Island, has earned him recognition as a leading voice for indigenous rights and sustainable policy. In this exclusive interview, Professor Naidu reflects on his field experiences, the ethical challenges of development, and India's strategic vision for Great Nicobar, offering insights that bridge anthropology, ecology, and governance in 21st century. Professor Naidu, there is a lot of discussion in print, mass, and social media every day about the Great Nicobar project development. What are your views on these ongoing debates? My view is that much of what is being said today does not reflect the ground realities. Nearly 75% of those who speak or write about the Great Nicobar project have never actually visited the island. Their opinions are largely based on hypothetical arguments or secondary source data. This leads to a serious misunderstanding of the situation. Without first hand observation and engagement with the local environment and people, especially the Shompen, these debates risk misleading both the public and policy makers. Real understanding requires field experience, cultural sensitivity, and genuine concern for the island fragile ecosystem. Why are the Shompen people considered so important to India and the world? The Shompen are one of the last surviving hunting gathering tribes of Nicobar Islands, living deep in the evergreen forests of Great Nicobar. They represent a unique cultural and genetic heritage of humanity. Their way of life is a living museum of human evolution, self sufficient, ecological, and harmonious with nature. Conserving them means preserving a priceless human legacy. You have worked closely with the Shompen. Could you describe your personal experience? During my fieldwork between 1993 and 1996, it took me nearly 6 months to win their trust. Initially, they were shy and would vanish into the forests upon seeing outsiders. But once rapport was built, they were extraordinarily warm and cooperative and intelligent. I lived with them for months, sharing food, learning their rhythms, and even teaching them how to cook rice. Their innocence and generosity touched me deeply. Once trust was earned, they became affectionate friends. This intimacy taught me humility. The greatest teacher is the field itself. I cooked food for them, taught them to eat cooked rice, a moment I still cherish deeply. Their innocence and adaptability are remarkable. Can we stop the project to protect the Shompen? Practically, no. The project is now of national and international significance, envisaged as a strategic port and economic zone. Instead of opposing it, we must integrate humanitarian conservation within the project framework, ensuring the Shompen's survival and participation. Has there been any official attempt before to create such a plan? Yes, in 2020, the then Chief Secretary Sri Chetan B. Shanghai invited me for a detailed discussion on developing a conservation plan for the Shompen. He appreciated my proposal and gave me full liberty to design the framework. Unfortunately, both he and the principal conservation of the forest were transferred soon after, and the plan was not implemented. I have also worked as a member of Andaman Tribal Research Institute for one term. What lessons can India learn from global indigenous models? The Inuit co-management model of Canada, which I have suggested in my previous lecture, offers a vital lesson. Indigenous groups there become equal partners in development projects, received revenue shares, and participated in decision making. Applying this model, Shompen communities can be stakeholders in ecotourism, forest monitoring, and sustainable livelihoods, ensuring dignity and participation rather than displacement. What is FPIC and why is it important for Shompen engagement? FPIC stands for Free, Prior, and Informed Consent, a global ethical principle that ensures indigenous communities' participation voluntarily and fully in any decision affecting their land or life. For the Shompen, adopting FPIC will prevent exploiting and build trust between them, policymakers, and developers. How do you propose implementing FPIC and GNIPC frameworks? Through a three-phase approach. Phase 1, awareness and trust building via AAJVS, mediators, and anthropologists. Phase 2, consultation and participatory mapping with the Shompen community. Phase 3, formal consent and monitoring under the proposed Great Nicobar Indigenous Partnership Council, that is GNIPC. This model mirrors Arctic co-management and censures no rapid imposition on their way of life. How should government agencies collaborate? Success depends on interagency coordination. The Tribal Welfare Department, AAJVS, and Ministry of Environment must work as one, guided by anthropological insights. Each phase should include clear timelines, ethical oversight, and transparent reporting. Do the Shompen show willingness to adapt to change? When we approach with respect, once trust is built, they are eager to learn and share. They are intelligent and curious. Change must be gentle and participatory, never imposed. Can we involve the Shompen directly in the Great Nicobar project? Yes, but gradually and selectively. For example, in forest conservation, river protection, eco guarding, and traditional medicine, they can serve as the custodians of the nature rather than victims of development. How do you propose we relocate or rehabilitate them? Before any relocation, we must consult the Shompen themselves and the tribal elders of each territorial band. They have well defined boundaries and kin based divisions. Forced relocation will create conflict. A new Shompen rehabilitation zone can be developed near the Shompen complex, but with their consent and participation. What kind of anthropological team do we need? A small dedicated group of field anthropologists, empathetic, patient, and trained in tribal communication. They must stay on the island, share the Shompen's life, and act as a bridge between the community and the administration. How long might successful rehabilitation take? At least 5 to 10 years of consistent engagement, not one time program. What role does anthropology play in this conservation? Anthropology offers tools like participant observation, ethnographic report, and cultural mapping. Only by living among them, eating, walking, and communicating in their rhythm can one understand their needs. A team of trained anthropologists must stay with them for months to ensure the rehabilitation is human centered, not administrative. What is your view on the Galathea River role in their life? The Galathea River is sacred to them, a source of pure sweet water surrounded by Rudraksha trees. It is their spiritual and ecological center. Protecting the river is the essential to protecting the Shompen identity itself. The Great Nicobar project directly affects the Shompen living along the Galathea River. particularly the inhabitants of Piloba, Pilokonji, and Sangambash. Do you think relocation of these groups is feasible? Relocation is possible, but it must be slow, humane, and fully participatory. The Shompen of these settlements are already aware of increasing outsiders' presence. Persuasion, not pressure, is the only way forward. If relocate becomes inevitable, the Shompen themselves must identify the new campsites, and other Shompen bands must approve their entry into new territories. Their consent and cooperation are fundamental since each band has its own well defined boundaries, customs, and ecological zones. Relocation without these steps would mean disintegration of their culture. You mentioned that each band has its own territorial boundaries, but how are these boundaries defined if there are no maps or written records? Yes, that is a very insightful question. The Shompen, like many other ancient forest communities, mark their territories through natural landmarks, large trees, distinctive rocks, water streams, and particular bends of the river. These are not drawn on paper but remembered through oral tradition, passed from elders to the younger generation. Every tree, every ridge carries a story or a taboo that signifies ownership or belonging. This form of spatial memory is as effective as any modern map, and it has ensured peaceful coexistence among different Shompen bands for centuries. As an anthropologist, how do you see your role in such conflicts between development and conservation? Anthropology must stand as a moral compass between the state and the voiceless. Our role is not to oppose development but to humanize it, to ensure that policies understand the pulse of the local lives. In Galathea, our task is to be interpreters between two worlds, the planners who speak in blueprints and the Shompen who speak in rivers and trees. Bridging that gap is not charity, it is justice. In your view, what should be the guiding principles for the Indian government when it comes to any development plan that intersects with Shompen territory? The guiding principle must be ecological democracy. This means the development decision should arise from consultation, not imposition. Every intervention, whether a road, port, or research camp, must pass through a cultural impact assessment, not just an environmental one. The Shompen should be represented in the decision making process through trusted mediators like the AAJVS, that is Andaman Adamajati Vikas Samiti. Development must not treat the forest as an empty land. It must recognize it as a living homeland. As a senior anthropologist, what changes do you wish to see in how research is conducted among the vulnerable tribes like the Shompen? Anthropology must evolve from observation to advocacy. In the past, we documented, now we must defend. Research should always obtain free, prior, and informed consent from the community, and findings must return to them in a form they can use. Collective research with the community members as co investigators is the ethical way forward. Data gathering from indigenous communities should never become instruments of exploitation. The Shompen must remain the owners of their knowledge. How do you see the Shompen fitting into India's larger narrative of development and diversity? The Shompen are India's most silent citizens, yet their existence completes our national fabric. They remind us that civilization has many forms, not just urban, but also forest dwelling and introspective. Protecting them is not charity, it is our constitutional and moral duty. India's greatness will be measured not by skyscrapers on the coast, but by the peace we preserve in the Galathea forest. You once mentioned that your age and health make fieldwork challenging. How do you see your role now? While I may no longer trek those forests, my role now is to guide younger anthropologists and policy planners. It requires sacrifice. Walking miles without food or shelter was once part of my life. Today, my strength lies in mentoring and ensuring that my experience benefits the next generation of researchers. That is deeply moving. So, your motivation goes beyond academic curiosity. Absolutely, anthropology is not about collecting data, it is about understanding life itself. The Shompen are among the last living example of humans' earliest social order, where cooperation replaces competition and nature is not a resource but a relative. Many motivations go beyond academic curiosity. It is a moral responsibility to preserve and protect their existence from incentives interventions. The Shompen do not need charity, they need dignity, recognition, and the right to live their own terms. What spiritual dimension did you find in your work? Every tribe teaches us the sacred law of existence. Among the Shompen, I realized that nature itself is divine, trees, rivers, and mountains are living deities. This worldview, aligned with the Sanatana Dharma philosophy of Vasudeva Kutumbam, the whole world is one family. How can India integrate such a traditional wisdom into policy? By blending modern governance with cultural empathy, indigenous conservation ethics, respect for rivers, forests, spiritual and sacred places should guide national policy. The goal is not just development, but dharma based development. What is your personal vision for the Shompen future? My vision is simple, that they continue to exist as themselves. Let them not be erased by our development, our education, or our politics. Let them live with dignity, with access to the healthcare and protection, but without losing their cultural identity. If India can ensure that the Shompen thrive on their own land with autonomy, respect, and sustainability, we will not only protect a tribe but preserve a living chapter of human evolution. This is not charity, it is a civilizational duty. Professor, what keeps you professionally motivated at this stage of life? It is the belief that knowledge is meaningful only when it uplifts lives. I may not be able to walk those forest trails anymore, but my spirit is still with them. Every word I wrote, every lecture I give, is a tribute to those who live silently in the heart of the forest. The Shompen, our unseen citizens of humanity. Finally, what is your vision for the Shompen future? My dream is to see a self sustained Shompen community, healthy, respected, and culturally alive, coexisting peacefully with the modern world. We cannot revive the past, but we can ensure that future is one of dignity, not in disappearance. What is your final message? This Shompen taught me what it means to live in balance with nature. If India can save the Shompen, it can show the world how development and humanity can coexist. The government of India can make history by transforming the Shompen from subjects of concern into partners in progress, just as Canada did with the Inuit, that is, Eskimos. By embedding respect, participation, and ecological ethics at the heart of Great Nicobar's development, India can prove to the world that strategic ambition and human dignity are not opposites. They are the two pillars of the civilization maritime future. As the dialogue concludes, Professor Naidu's words remind us that a true development is not measured in infrastructure or GDP, but in human dignity and ecological balance. His lifelong dedication to the Shompen and other indigenous communities stands as a moral compass for India's future policies. The Great Nicobar project, he argues, must evolve as a model of coexistence where progress walks hand in hand with preservation. For Professor Naidu, anthropology is not merely a discipline but a sacred duty to protect the lost voices of human innocence before they are silenced by noise of modernity. Each answer is expressed in his authentic voice, thoughtful, humanistic, and rooted in lived experience. Thank you very much, Professor Subramanyam Naidu.